Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast. My name is Ganesh Krishnan. I'm the co founder and CEO at Anzenna. We have here with us today Abhishek Iyer, who runs risk and compliance at Cargurus. Abhishek, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ganesh. Excited to do this podcast with you. I'm Abhishek Iyer. I manage the risk and compliance team at Cargurus. I've been in the field of information security for last 14 years. Spent time doing incident response, security operations, application security. Uh, but my passion is data risk, data security, and data governance. And so here we are to talk about our favorite topic.
That's great. That's great. Great background, Abhishek. And given your passion, we need a lot more passionate people in data security because it's a hard problem, at least as I understand it. So how do you, just to kick things off, right? How can individuals and businesses truly understand the scope of their data security risks? Why is it important? If you can kick us off.
Yes. So we often talk about tech stacks and technology, but we do not talk much about data. And as business, we rely on this data to make decisions every day. CISOs, CEOs, everybody are relying on this data to make decisions to help their business. And in order to make effective decisions, the quality of the data needs to be important, but also the confidentiality of the data needs to be taken care of. Um, and so we run into a problem wherein we do not have a good idea of in the industry in many organizations where all these data points or data sets lie. We have different data stores. Um, like example is Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox. We have like Snowflake, S3 buckets. There's no shortage of data stores in today's age. I mean, if you go back many years when everything was on-prem, you could kind of containerize it to databases or on your on-prem data centers. Now everything being in the cloud is out there. And so in order for us to take value, or in order for business to take value of that data, we need to make sure that it is protected, but also its confidentiality and integrity is maintained.
That's great. That's great. And what can businesses do to truly understand their data? Like, how do they go about it?
The first part of the problem is identification and classification. Now, off late, there is this terminology that I've uh, learned is data lineage. And we have been talking about this for years, but now it seems to be talked about even more. And the entire life cycle of the data when it comes into an organization to a point when it has to leave the organization is what we have to maintain because of for data lineage. And so the first thing that any organization that I would suggest to do is find a way to identify where we are keeping all the data. What are the critical data sources? What are the critical data types that really matter to the organization? And that should be the step one. We cannot protect what we do not know.
Mhm. That's great. That's great. Yeah, and good analogy here might be data flows like water. So lineage actually helps you understand where are all the points where the data is flowing. Given what you had said, hey, data is everywhere, right? And we
Exactly.
want data to be everywhere, but we have to protect it as well.
Exactly. And with AI tools coming in, relying on that data, uh, we need to know how this data is used to get the outputs that we want from the different AI tools.
Great. And so along that line, right? AI is everywhere now, right?
Mhm.
And so how is the landscape of data security evolving with the advent of AI and the advancements in AI more importantly?
We can use AI to actually solve for this problem. So we can actually have certain controls in place to make sure that that the data that we are trying to protect is not going into these AI solutions. But it comes back to the original problem: is do we know as security experts where all the data is? and then what guardrails are there around that data stores.
Great, great. And also there is, AI, but then there is also remote work, right?
Mhm.
So how has that impacted data security, and what are some of the key challenges there?
Remote during COVID, of course, it was a big challenge for many companies because some companies have gone from a very strict in-office model to completely remote, and it was more challenging for the security teams to bring in technological controls to protect uh, the data, but also it had to enable the business to run. So it was a decision, I think, a very tough decision for everybody to make is what takes priority. Is this business continuity is going to be my priority, or data security is my priority? Uh, Luckily, I think we have enough uh, data security tools, data loss prevention tools uh, in place. I think there are some really cool solutions wherein it does security within the browser. There are some great solutions that has plugins that can help with data security. We have at our disposal as an industry, and so that could be used. Uh, your traditional VPN methods have also been leveraged to protect with data security, but there's no one size fits all, and everybody had to come up with their own solution to solve for that problem. And but that also opened for other challenges, right? So data classification, actually tagging those different types of data, let's say confidential, PII, PCI, but tagging that to the objects was something that many companies, I think, have I feel have struggled with it. And so you have a tough time in protecting if you're not able to tag exactly what type of data uh, it's in that environment, and also help the end user to not be the one who's making that decision. I always feel that the end user uh, responsible has a lot of responsibilities, right? The security is not their first job, it's not their main job. It's something that they have to keep in the back of the mind, and putting that responsibility on the end user is the risk. So I would prefer to have the end user not worry too much about, like, am I putting the wrong data in, but rather when the controls work and when it gets blocked or popped up, they understand why it's getting blocked or popped up so that it's not disrupting the business.
Yeah, so this is a great segue, right? So you mentioned DLP, data loss prevention, and this is kind of really important given the issue that we are talking about. So, you said, hey, it's really important to understand what data you have where, and then it's also important to understand where it's flowing. And DLP solutions play an important part in kind of safeguarding all of that entire flow. So, what do you think in terms of like, what are the characteristics of a best-in-class DLP solution? And what are some common mistakes that people make when implementing a DLP?
Great question. So I I've seen the DLP solution markets just evolve over a period of time. Earlier, it used to be just agent based, very resource intensive, that really, especially the engineers in many organizations were not happy with it because it was slowing down their laptops. The agents have become lighter, but there has been a lot of innovation around not only utilizing just agents, but also APIs connecting to the data stores to provide with DLP. I think, like I mentioned, browser-based DLP uh, is was a genius method if you can standardize the browser that you want to use in your organization. Uh, Plugins to the browsers is also a best way to do it. Uh, but I think the future of DLP, in my opinion, should be agentless.
Hmm.
It's easier said than done, but we have enough telemetry in the applications that most endpoints have to provide with that data that you can have APIs connect to it, and then you can put controls in place without having an agent on board, right? So that is where I see the future. The other thing that I think we definitely need is utilizing AI to create a data security posture.
Mhm.
Instead of saying, okay, this type of data, it's going out, block it. It needs to understand the scenarios to better provide with that defense in depth mechanism. And the reason why I say it is one of the bigger challenges with DLP is the amount of alerts that it generates.
Mhm.
And we want to be, we want the end user to have the best experience, but we all know that the security teams are continuously getting burnt out. You have alerts coming from various systems. And if the DLP tool is providing so many alerts, and if you're not able to make a decision of what kind of controls we need to put, like block or monitor or just a pop-up, we will miss something that we are not supposed to miss. So it all comes back to data lineage, identifying the key systems that really matter to you, the type of data that really matters to you, and where you do not want that data to go, the entire life cycle. That will help in not only understand what controls to put, but also reduce those alerts to an manageable level.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I think to summarize, if I were to like the future of DLP is agentless, which I
Mhm.
think makes a lot of sense. There's too many agents. People are complaining about things
Yep.
slowing down their machines, and there's enough telemetry in existing agents
Yeah.
so to do this appropriately. So that's a great thing. The second thing is you mentioned about lineage and classification. To extend that comment, right? One of the things that I have personally observed is there's lots of alerts because if you set a DLP rule that says please flag me on PII or PHI, most of what people might deal with, including their personal information, might be PII or PHI. So how do you see people implementing or overcoming, and that may be causing a lot of those alerts, right?
Yeah.
Any suggestions on improving that and making that better?
So in my view, when you implement DLP solution and you want to prioritize on your alerts, you look at the type of data, let's say credit card, social security number, PHI, PII, but you also have to tie it from where it is coming.
Mm-hmm.
If it is coming from, let's say, your uh, Azure instance or your OneDrive or the company OneDrive or Box or something like that. So that's where I was talking about like smart agents to correlate those together to say, hey, this is not normal and we need to
Mm-hmm.
block it. Or if I see, great example is I can send W2s, my own W2s from Workday outside, which is my personal one. But suddenly I see an activity of like 300, 400, 500 W2s going outside
Mm-hmm.
to um, a non-managed system that should be blocked, not even alerted, right? It's at that time should be blocked. So creating scenarios which will actually cause most damage is one that, as the only thing that the security teams and the various cybersecurity teams should architect and then put it in the policy in the DLP solution to make it work. The mistakes that I've seen happen is you plug in your DLP solution, you see all those alerts, and then you're combing through what is actually relevant. And it may work initially, but as the number of events increases, it's going to burn out the SOC team.
Got it. Got it. So flip it to some extent, right? Like add the context before alerting.
Yes.
And if I were to paraphrase you, like pay more attention to things like volumetric analysis, right? You may have a few SSNs,
Mm.
that's not great, but if you have hundreds of them or tens of them going out, then that becomes like it's not an individual's SSN. Nobody has 100 SSNs at their disposal, like legitimate person. So then you should just block that. Yeah, that's a great point.
Or even patterns wherein consistent patterns of something is going egress in a specific interval, but in just small duration. Those kind of analysis and patterns that we should be utilizing to block from going outside.
Great, great. This is a great point, specific points that people can use. So thank you for that. Now, moving on to sort of data breaches in general, right? We often think of data breaches as external attacks, right? Like, hacker in the hoodie compromising stuff, which certainly happens.
Yeah.
But how much of data is actually lost from within an organization through accidental or negligent or even malicious disclosure?
Yeah. So there is a possibility of happening accidentally, and that's why I came back to um, I like the idea of not putting too much of the onus on the end user to be careful about what is PII. Am I sending the right things outside, or I should not be doing that way? Uh, Taking a step further, most of our data classification or identification policies are are not easy to be converted into technical languages.
Mhm.
And so while we all know that credit card information should not go outside, or certain health information should not go outside, or first name, last name should not go outside, there are many factors associated with what PII is that unless you are in that field, you may not know much about it. So education, security awareness trainings, education play a very important role, but supplementing that education with the right controls and mechanisms using DLP and tagging them. So uh, in during my experience, they use Microsoft plays a very big role in this, wherein you can actually tag the types of data that really matter to you as an organization. So if I'm attaching a file on my Outlook and it contains some kind of PCI or any other information, it is going to throw in an alert. So
Mhm.
then the user, giving the user the ability to make a decision at that point to go with it or not, or even change the classification based on what it is in there. In addition to that, of course, the prevention control. I think a combination of those two will help in uh, in making sure that the accidental exposure of the data does not happen.
Mhm.
That's more from the end user perspective. Of course, there are other ways wherein there may be accidental exposure, uh, poor configuration, poor access management, IAM rules. And so data security is not just about identifying the data and DLP, but also other cloud security posture tools or any other technical solutions that we can put in place to supplement it. It goes hand in hand.
Correct. Yeah. Like maybe, for instance, if you use big data systems, right? People who have access, is anything leaking out of there,
Mhm.
right? It's probably equally important. Absolutely. Yeah.
The other challenge,
Great.
of course,
Mhm.
you may have read the latest Verizon data breach report where we talk about third-party risks. And in today's ecosystem, the third party, fourth party plays a very important role. So also identifying what type of data is sent to said third parties, and do we have the right retention periods in place so that while we need it, we are not keeping it more than what we need it for, right?
Mhm.
Having less data means less things to secure.
Absolutely, yeah, and the vendor aspect of vendor compromises have certainly gone up in the next year, according to in the last year, according to the Verizon DBIR report. So yeah, that's a great point. Is to not just keep track of yourself, but also keep track of your vendors because you're sending them a lot of data. So
Yes, but
great,
also making sure that there is accountability of the data that is going.
yes, absolutely. Great. So when we talk about, you talked about business users, it's kind of hard for them to kind of understand all this and wrap their head around, right? And they certainly play a huge part in accidental data disclosure as a result. How do you as a security leader have these conversations with your business counterparts, right? Oh, I want to start blocking, when you start sharing stuff, online or whatever, and they'll be like, why are you stopping me from doing my job?
Yeah.
So how do you manage that?
It is not going to be an easy conversation. Everybody wants to move faster, and well, everybody accepts the need for it. Once it becomes affects the business, then that's wherein it becomes a difficult conversation. Um, and in order to avoid that, we should first go and talk to these business owners to see what their day to day is, what type of data that they are transferring, for what purposes. Is there a secure way for us to enable to do that data transfer and sending of that data to make sure that it is authentic whenever it's going outside? The next step would should be to still monitor it,
Hmm.
still monitor but not block, still monitor it to make sure that, uh, for example, a particular team within the department is supposed to send X amount of data to, let's say, an auditor.
Hmm.
Data lineage, right? That transaction is supposed to happen. And as long as we have that documented and the rules and policies uh, documented, we know that anything that deviates from it should be captured. And so documenting the data flows so that the SOC team can understand what is an actual flow, what versus what should not happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Like, I mean, I think, you already mentioned educating business users, and second is, being part of the solution, right? And saying, okay, what is it that you're trying to do? And being able to basically solve the problem for them, even if that includes monitoring or security controls. And then it's a more of a data-driven conversation, a solution-oriented conversation, which is a
Exactly.
much easier thing to do than to put blocks in place, I suppose, right?
Exactly. And from a risk perspective or from a GRC perspective, I always think that my job is to enable the business move faster. The analogy that I like to give is, you can buy a Ferrari, but if I remove the brakes and the seat belts in it, you're not going to ride it at like 300 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour.
Mhm.
But if I put brakes, seat belt, airbags, give you a helmet, then you will go full speed. And so that's how I feel that our responsibility is to provide the right guardrail so that the business can move faster.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So just kind of touching upon the GRC aspect, right? There's a lot of regulatory things, GDPR, CCPA, around data,
Mhm.
right? And so, what do you see some of the things that actually work in these regulations? What do you see that things that don't work? What's the best way to deal, like navigate these and comply with these?
There's two parts to it. I think the GDPR and CCP especially has benefited GRC teams and security teams in providing the right guidance to the business of why we need to do this, and we all have leveraged it uh, to put the right controls in place. What we have not done, in my opinion, a good job of it is tie those regulations and the requirements into controls and effectively technically implement it,
Mhm.
because the regulations are policies are very high level. It There are some frameworks that you can use like CIS or NIST CSF or NIST
Mhm.
153 to map it,
Mhm.
but I do not see a very consistent mapping to every regulatory requirement. So I think NIST is coming with a privacy framework. I think there are other bodies that suggest some frameworks. And I think that's the direction that is going. But today, it is not a centralized requirement to control framework. And so that's where, and I think we are not there yet. Because once we have that, we can actually uh, talk in terms of controls, talk in terms of risk scenarios, controls, and how it all maps to the above regulatory requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, right? Like oftentimes the at least the compliance regulations are very high level, and people have their own interpretation, which kind of loses a lot of the standardization that you want.
That's
And
correct.
if you have, yeah, right. And I think that's a great point, and that happens everywhere, including this space, which is important to bridge the gap, right, over time. So
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think, I mean, we've covered a bunch of different areas as part of this great discussion. Lots of specifics and insights. So thank you for that. Any summarizing last words before we end?
Yeah. I think data governance is the need of the hour, data security. But if I take a level up, data governance is the need of the hour. And that also brings into data lifecycle. I think we all probably should start thinking from, okay, how is the data entering in my environment? Why are we using it? And how can we get rid of it? Because a security researcher had told me a long time ago, and we were talking from an AppSec perspective, less code means less vulnerabilities, and less data means less things to worry about and effective security.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful summary. Thank you so much for providing your insights, taking the time today, and I'm sure the audience will find it amazingly insightful and useful. Thank you once again, Abhishek. Thank you for the time.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.